is as serious as I'm being and talking about like, oh, the changes in the character depth and everything else they're doing. It's wonderful. I kind of personally love that the title of this episode is called literally, "In about 6 hours, I lose my virginity to a fish." So even the serious subject matter they're dealing with, they could still be very, very irreverent. You know, the implications of that title alone are just numerous. Hello, and thank you for checking out the video. I just want to let you know that I not only create content on my YouTube channel, Class in the Glass, but I'm also on Twitch, where I review movies, cartoons, and TV shows live, while also playing single-player games and multiplayer games. I also have a Patreon, where subscribers have access to hundreds of video and audio commentaries for films and cartoons, as well as podcasts and videocasts. In the meantime, thank you again for watching, and enjoy the video. We're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the next part of my show, and that is my review for Invincible Season 2, Episode 2. I'm going to be doing these on a weekly basis, chat. You know, since I've been really, obviously I loved Invincible Season 1, and so far I'm really enjoying Season 2. And I was just so busy in October with just like horror movie reviews, that stuff that I would have wanted to do like, weekly episode reviews of, I just wasn't able to because of my incredibly busy schedule. So very excited to be doing these weekly reviews for this series specifically. And again, for people that don't know the general background synopsis of Season 2 and of this particular episode, Mark is currently grappling with his guilt over his father's destructive and murderous activities, while Debbie Grayson tries to move forward despite her overwhelming grief, while the Guardians of the Globe themselves deal with internal and many external issues. Now, as I, did in my first review for episode 1 of Season 2, talking about the comic, I am familiar with Invincible. I have read all of the comic. Remember reading it way back in the day, Chad, and in the early 2000s. Again, people don't know. I mean, really, I guess Robert Kirkman's Invincible was the first thing that people started to like notice him for. It's like, oh wow, this is really great. This is even before like Ultimate Spider-Man. It's funny, people call Invincible like Ultimate Spider-Man before Ultimate Spider-Man. But what made Robert Kirkman's name obviously was Walking Dead. But Invincible, I liked even more than the Walking Dead, and I read it for years and collected many of the volumes. I know that it wrapped up relatively recently in the last couple years. Did not think it ended particularly well, and I feel like a number of the last story arcs are quite sloppy. However, what is very encouraging is the fact that they are modernizing a lot of stuff in the comic. They are making numerous changes, and I would argue that most of the changes that they have made, the grand majority of the changes they've made for the animated adaptation have been very, very good, and we actually see some of those changes within this specific episode, which is very, very nice. But now getting to the episode itself, I also is as serious as I'm being and talking about like, oh, the changes in the character depth and everything else they're doing. It's wonderful. I kind of personally love that the title of this episode is called literally, "In about 6 hours, I lose my virginity to a fish." So even the serious subject matter they're dealing with, they could still be very, very irreverent. The implications of that title alone are just numerous. But I think it's a very funny and wonderful way to start this episode. And despite, the comedic nature of several of the subplots, the thing that most appealed to me, obviously, about this particular episode is Mark's overwhelming guilt, Debbie's grief, and also Adam Eve's own interpersonal struggles with the type of hero she wants to be, and also her really abusive family. Like Mark in this episode, he's trying so hard, like, not to be his father or be viewed as his father. He doesn't even like to be referred to as the son of Omni-Man. And he, he's going through so much. He's graduating high school. That seems to be like the last thing on his mind right now. Obviously, it would be based on everything that he's come to learn in the last just few months. All these huge changes, But within this episode itself, even though there's so many times he says I'm not my father. I don't even want to be referred to as my father's son. Okay, I'm not Omni-Man. But what's so interesting about this episode is that there are moments in which he displays some of his father's tendencies, and he does this in such a way to get the job done. And we see this in several instances in this episode, especially in his interactions with Darkwing, or the new Darkwing, the former ward, or they say the assistant. He's like, sidekick? He's like, no, assistant. It's degrading when you say sidekick. And he's like, okay, whatever, man. But Darkwing has gone completely insane, and he's pretty much become Zack Snyder's Zack Snyder's Superman, basically Zack Snyder's Batman. He's pretty much become Zack Snyder's Batman, where he's just murdering all of the criminals within his city. And Invincible goes to the city to stop him. He's sent by Cecil to deal with him and to bring him in so he can be evaluated and get the help that he obviously needs and deserves. But throughout that episode, Darkwing is constantly just throwing out the fact that I am here to defend this city and this planet from the son of Omni-Man. You're a murderer and everything. And Mark has to kind of deal with that. He's controlling himself, and he's doing a great job. He's doing a great job controlling himself and not indulging in super aggressive behavior. But then there's a point where there's somewhat of a breaking point where after Darkwing does something particular, and where so much so that it would probably end with both of them dying horrifically. Mark is saying listen, you don't know what I'm capable of. As you said before, I'm the son of Omni-Man. And I can do so many things that could hurt you. And it's whoa. And so he's even using some of that in his, day-to-day, superhero antics. And it's him grabbing the fact that I had to, in order to save the day, in order to save this person, I had to be like my father. And you can tell that it's just eating him up inside, and it's really, really bothering him. And I like that. That's what's so great about Mark's character, is that especially initially in season 1, he was so excited to be just like his dad. He was so excited to be a superhero. And interacting with all these different people he always aspired to be and looked up to, and his whole world changed. It crumbled. And he doesn't, he's not taking any pleasure now in being a superhero at this point. Certainly we see that in episode 1 when he's doing all these amazing things, but he's just so depressed. And even here, he in order to save the day, he has to act like his dad, to it, even 1% like his dad, a small, minute amount. But he had to do that, and he hates it. And I love that they're doing that with him. But he also has these moments where he's very much trying not to be his father. There's this whole situation with Atlantis, which, refers to the title again. In about 6 hours, I lose my virginity to a fish. And where he gets wrapped up, since his father murdered the last king of Atlantis, due to their customs, he has to answer for his father's crimes. He has to go down there. He has to defend himself. And, the situation kind of plays out and, in a funny way. They make a major change in the comics, or in the adaptation. The comics, it plays out very differently, but here they make a much better change, in my opinion. And where, even though the Atlanteans aren't particularly fond of him for a variety of reasons, and he has an opportunity to leave and to escape because something quite destructive is happening to their civilization, he chooses not to, and he chooses to go back and save as many people as he possibly can, because I'm not my dad. Even when other people are telling him no, don't, they brought this himself. He's like, I don't care. I don't want these people to die. I was like, that is so great. I love that they're doing that with him. It's wonderful. So far, Mark's been treated incredibly well, but also to the same degree, Debbie, Deborah Grayson is trying to be just the best mother she can be for her son. But she's dealing with her own, problems and struggles. But when you see in this episode, it's I like it because, so much for this episode, she is, trying to celebrate the fact that Mark is graduating high school, and he just doesn't seem to care. He's just kind of listless right now. And she wants to do these kind of mother-son activities with him. It's hey, you're graduating. Let's go to the beach. Let's just have fun. Let's get dinner. Let's do that. And I really love that they have these scenes with her in this particular episode, because people don't know. Now it's more so, it just kind of stands out. The way in which Robert Kirkman wrote Debbie in the original graphic novel was really terrible. It just really is. There's so much about that book which is fantastic and is great, and, I love, but wow, the way he wrote Debbie, where he just wrote Debbie to be a wine mom. She's just an alcoholic, and that's all she was in those books, and it's not until well, I don't even want to say what happens, but where she comes out of her slump and is kind of for like a really kind of gross, shitty reason why she comes out of the slump. Like she's not a character in the book, really, you know. Here she is such a wonderful character, and they give her so much to do, and you know she's trying to do this for Mark. And she's trying to like, hey, I gotta pick myself up. I have to move forward. And, you know, she's a realtor. That's what she does. And I was like, where's this story going? And it's interesting because she observes a really abusive relationship while she is showing off a house. She sees like this husband being like really aggressive and really demeaning to his partner, to his wife. And she is seeing that, and it brings about the return of her grief and her interactions with like Nolan, and she's like she's seeing herself in that person in the episode, and she even mutters under her breath she's not a pet because the guy's like treating her like a pet, and I love that. And there's an interesting thing where she comes back home and she's trying to decompress, and they establish this interesting like little gag in the episode that initially is kind of funny. There's this cupboard because the house got put together after like Nolan killed all those people. And so Cecil sent all of his, you know, contractors things. They basically rebuilt the house, right? And they fixed everything. But there's like certain things that aren't working. And there's like this one cupboard that's always kind of coming off of its hinges. It can't close all the way. And like Mark's always trying to close and she's always trying to close it. And it kind of goes back and forth, right? And she comes back home and she gets the wine, right? She gets, you know, little girl wine mom Debbie. And she gets it, and she opens the cupboard, and she closes it, and it opens up when she turns around. And she fucking freaks. She freaks, and she breaks down, and she smashes the hell out of that cupboard, and she's swearing up a storm, and she's like, ah! She like destroys the kitchen, right? She's smashing glasses and bottles, and it's just her rage over everything that she's just gone through, and she's been trying to keep it together, and she breaks down. And then like Mark comes in and he's trying to console her, and she initially does something that I found like kind of heartbreaking, but then later on it's like, okay, they kind of move forward is all I'll say. But I was like, wow. And again, they're doing so much more with her in this show, and I really appreciate it because again, her character in the book was not written well. And so I do appreciate Robert Kirkman said like, hey, you know what? We got to modernize some of this stuff. A lot of this stuff is dated, and I was not thinking at the time of how to make this better. And so now they have the opportunity to do so. So I've liked the majority of the changes to this series. And so this, especially the stuff they're doing with Debbie. She's not a tertiary character like she is in the book. She is very much one of the main leads. She's one of the co-leads of this series. And so it really stood out to me. Like, I think her stuff was my favorite aspect of this episode, right? Because they also deal with some other, like, you know, there's some goofier things. You know, they do manage to pepper some fun stuff in here. And of course, like, great action and well animated things. We get a whole battle with Doc Seismic and his Magnamites, his like these magma mole people, right? And you know, you get all the stuff in Atlantis, and yes, all that. But it's the drama. It's the moment to moment character stuff and interactions. Like, my favorite in this big super bombastic superhero show, my favorite moment was when the mom is trying to deal with her grief of her husband who was lying to her for like 20 years, you know, and she has a moment where she breaks down. Like, that's my favorite moment in this episode. It goes to show you, like, not only is it well animated, but it's incredibly, obviously well written. And then we get to like Adam Eve, who I say is probably the third biggest character in this episode. Because I've been curious, you know, Adam Eve, you know, in the first season, they don't really give her that much to do, right? But I loved her episode. I loved her standalone prequel episode, which came out before, kind of acted as a prologue to season 2, and it's great. It's really, really good. And I, you know, at the time when I was doing audio commentary, did my review, I was like, they're probably doing this because they're going to have more of a focus on her in the second season, right? And the first episode, they didn't really do too much with her, but here they give her a lot more to do in this episode. You know, Adam Eve, she's rebuilding Chicago since, you know, Omni-Man destroyed most of it. And, you know, and she wants to make things, you know, better by cutting through the bureaucracy. Like, there's this moment where she's basically repairing a building, and the construction crews are like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I'm repairing the building," but and they're like, "But we don't know if this is up to regulation." She's like, "Whatever." And people are like, "We've been sleeping in a goddamn gymnasium for 6, 7, 8 months, okay? Like, we're tired of it." She's doing stuff while you guys are having your committee meetings and sipping coffee, and everyone's like, "Yeah!" And she's like, "See, right?" And, in that moment, it's like what she's doing is an act of kindness. There's no question. But one that's also tinged with a bit of arrogance, right? And obvious resentment towards her parents and how they told her, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to be, right? And at first we're kind of like on her side, like we are on her side. It's like, yeah. And she does this one thing. She creates this amazing park for all the people. It's like, well, let me go ahead and do this. And it's like really good. The workers are like, whatever, right? And we're totally on her side, absolutely. And she is a great person, but she's one that's been shaped by the life that she's lived, by the environment that she grew up in. And again, the abuse towards her is still on full display, and especially interactions with her parents, where she goes back home and something's happening like with her family. They're not doing well in particular, and she's trying to help them out. And the mom is just, she's so put upon, and she's kind of meek, and people would argue like weak, and she lets the father kind of, just walk all over her. The dad is such a piece of shit. Adam Eve's dad, listen, I hate Omni-Man. I love to hate Omni-Man, but I hate the dad. He is a horrible, horrible human being, and he is so manipulative and emotionally and psychologically abusive. I'm shocked he hasn't hit her. I'm literally shocked he hasn't go, bah. It's the one thing that I'm thinking, well, this guy's going to do this at one point. He hasn't, probably because he knows that he would be horrifically killed by Eve if he did. But and the back and forth between the two, like you hate the dad so much. But something is brought up in her arguments, like with her parents, and she ends up, and it's something that she did earlier in the episode, that is this very triumphant, this very amazing thing, and she realizes like, oh, maybe what I did wasn't good, and now she has to grapple with her own guilt. And also deal with, and is confronted with how unchecked her powers might be. And how even though she's like, I want to penetrate the bureaucracy, I want to get rid of it, I want to cut right through it and do the things that people aren't able to do. Okay, that's what needs to happen. And she's like, oh, maybe some of that stuff is in place for a reason. And I like that. Even though you love Adam Eve, she's great in this episode. She really is. But it's like, oh, wow. How they're kind of able to shift, and even her point of view changes, I think is very good. Even though you're still very much on her side, but you're like, well, I kind of see now why some of those people might have been upset. Now it makes a little more sense. And so it's great. All that is great. Like, those are the three main characters in this episode I think are really cool. They introduce us to some other people, like, the Shapesmith. He's there. Voiced by Ben Schwartz. most recently, probably people know him best for voicing, Sonic in the Sonic the Hedgehog movies. He's playing Shapesmith, and he's very much the goofy character in this particular episode. They do some fun stuff with Rexplode and the Immortal and Duplicate. They do that thing, which if people read the comic, they did the thing, and if you know what I'm talking about, yes, it's very much that, and that's kind of cathartic, especially since Rex is such a horrible human being, and he deserves every bad thing that happens to him for the most part. And of course, they're like, what about Ainstrom Levy? Don't worry, they have something with Ainstrom Levy in this episode, and he's building something. He's putting together his plan, he's formulating his plan, and they're indulging the multiverse stuff. But how they're doing that is, I think, quite fun. Like, it's so weird that that this particular plot line is coming about during the era of just multiverse content, and some of it good, a lot of it bad. But this storyline was like written nearly 20 years ago. And so, and I could safely say that the Ainstrom Levy content in the comics is fantastic. And so again, if you're just like, oh, another multiverse thing, rest assured they're going to do a lot of great stuff with it, because the material is very, very good. I'm excited to finally see this in animated form, and obviously the confrontation between Mark and Ainstrom Levy. And Ainstrom Levy, I get the sense, is going to be the big villain for season 2. It's like, Omni-Man's always going to be present. Sure, we feel it. We always feel him. He's always there. He's always hanging above everyone, Chad, because everything that he did, which is really cool. But I think Ainstrom Levy is going to be obviously the main villain for this particular season, maybe even for several other seasons in the future. But yeah, it's a good episode. Really enjoyed it. Love the character stuff, particularly between, you know, Mark and Debbie and Adam Eve. That's really working for me. Setting up more stuff, obviously, of Ancient Lobby for episode 3 and beyond. And we're getting more, you know, stuff with the Guardians. I definitely want to, you know, get into some more interactions between like characters like Rudy, you know, Robot, and Monster Girl, because that goes in a crazy direction later on in the series, no doubt about that. So yeah, really solid episode. But what about you guys? What do you think of Invincible episode 2? Invincible season 2 episode 2? Let me know.
I hope everyone enjoyed the video, and I want to take the time to tell you about my Patreon, Class in the Glass, which offers hundreds of film commentaries and video reactions to numerous movies, TV shows, and cartoons. If you're a fan of shows like Batman the Animated Series and Avatar: The Last Airbender, or films like Aliens and Raiders of the Lost Ark, my Patreon is the platform for you. Currently, I'm doing a subathon to reach 75 subs on the platform. If we hit 75 subs, we'll be able to start voting on the next edited YouTube reaction, which will include actual clips and scenes from the movies and shows I comment over. Choose from such films as Fire and Ice, Masters of the Universe, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or Spawn. Subscribing at any tier level is appreciated, and feel free to give feedback at any time. Thank you again for watching the video, and see you next time.